So Albert Einstein is reputed to have said, if I had an hour to solve a really important problem, I'd spend 55 minutes defining the problem, delving into it, and 5 minutes talking about the solution. So we're going to try that today. I'm going to talk to you about why social innovation is very difficult and why it doesn't kind of follow the path that we have in the for-profit side of the economy. And I'm going to explain what the problem is, and then we're going to talk about solutions, and I'm hoping to involve all of you in the solution right at the end. And lest you think this is an academic problem, it's not. We have serious social problems that an increasing number of people are trying to solve. Problems like how do we deal with chronic homelessness, chronic medical conditions, breakdown of the foster care system. We can talk about a lot of different social problems, but I'm here today to talk about how do we get innovation of the same level that we have in the for-profit sector working against these issues in the nonprofit sector. Now, I'll submit that very few of you, I would venture to say, nobody got up this morning and said, I'm going to make something obsolete today. Is that a fair assumption? Okay. I'd like to quick show of hands about how many people within half an hour of getting out of bed this morning checked one of these. Almost everybody in the audience, okay? Had I asked that question 10 years ago, a lot of people probably would have looked at what I had in my hand and said, what's he holding up? And why should I even do that when I get out of bed? And that's an example of something that has had a very short amount of time to be adopted. It's a tech innovation from the for-profit side of our economy, and it's essentially changed large chunks of how we do things in society. Who's the guy over here on the right? Steve Jobs. You can't do a conversation on innovation anywhere in the world and not mention Steve Jobs. Who are the people on the left? These are the two co-founders of BlackBerry. Back in 2004, they invented the smartphone. The smartphone was not invented by Apple. Some would argue it was perfected by Apple. But between these two innovators, the BlackBerry came in 2004, the iPhone came 2007, iPhone 3, and within a very short amount of time, we have seen a revolution in how we do big things in society and small things in society just based on one for-profit innovation. The smartphone has changed everything from how we do work-life balance. That used to be a debate before 2004. Now when we're thinking about work-life balance, it's generally when we're checking our work email on the way home on the subway at 10 o'clock at night, and our work has essentially been extended into the personal part of our life. It's been melded because of one piece of technology. We've changed something as simple as falling in love. Falling in love used to be a happy accident. See somebody across a room, heaven forbid, meet them in a bar, or your friends might set you up with somebody. We've distilled something that poets and philosophers have debated about for years into a very simple swipe left, swipe right, swipe left, swipe right. We've even totally eliminated something that used to preoccupy a lot of time in bars. When you weren't trying to fall in love, you were usually arguing about arcane trivia. I think Sean Connery played James Bond in Her Majesty's Secret Service, and somebody says, no, I think it was George Lazenby. Before the smartphone, you could have that argument all night. And as your friends came into the bar, you would recruit people into the argument. I think he's right with Connery. No, I think he's right with George Lazenby. What do people do now? The minute the question's posed, it's like, oh, sorry, it was Lazenby. And the conversation stops. We've eliminated entire big pieces of what we used to do. We've also, if we need a poignant example of just what one for-profit innovation has done, this is an ad from the Buffalo News from February 1991. And a journalist in upstate New York found a bundle of these newspapers in a garage sale for $3. And a lot has changed since 1991. The politics, technology, the stock market, you could name anything. But the thing that struck him the most was this one flyer that took up the back page of the newspaper because of the 15 electronic items in this one ad from a place called Radio Shack. 13 of them have been replaced by something we are carrying in our pocket. That's why this became a very popular internet meme. It went around on the internet all over the world because people could, in one image, see what the technology was doing to just one part of the world. And lest we think this is an academic question, all of the things that were involved in producing these 13 items, their supply chains, the engineers who were designing them, the factories that were making them, the stores that were kind of putting them out. A store even like Radio Shack, which was incredibly profitable through most of the 20th century, now no longer exists. Entire parts of the for-profit economy have been rendered obsolete by one piece of innovation. Now, lest we think this is just about tech and the iPhone, this is a dynamic that happens across the for-profit economy. This is a study from McKinsey, and it basically says if you looked at the top 100 companies in America, the ones who are on top of the pyramid, the most powerful, well-resourced, attracted the best brains, they were the best corporations in 1917. Within 60 years' time, only 17 of them are in the top 100. So you could very easily look at that diagram and say, oh, maybe it was the Depression, maybe it was the 2 world wars that happened in there. The second one is the S&P 500 stock index from 1957 to 1997. The top 500 corporations listed on that index, there's only 74 just a short period of time later. The for-profit side of the economy continues to generate innovations that makes entire chunks of itself obsolete. But why, if we went back to 1917 and grabbed somebody and put them in a time machine and brought them here today, actually we could walk them a couple of blocks over to Jarvis Street, show them the Harbor Light mission, and it would look very much like this. And from 1917, somebody could say to me, yeah, I kind of get this model. You have beds, people are homeless. Yeah, we do the same thing. Why, if innovation from the for-profit sector is continually making things obsolete, have we not seen a similar level of innovation and obsolescence in the social side of our economy, the nonprofit sector? Why are we not having a conversation now that says, wow, you know, it's been years since I saw somebody who was homeless. Isn't it great we did this that rendered homelessness obsolete? From my standpoint, it boils down to what I'd call the tale of 2 lines, because this is what makes it real. I think we have a great argument that we need social innovation, not just because it's the right thing to do, not just because it involves human dignity and reinforcing the dignity of our fellow men and women. This is going to get very expensive and very unmanageable as the future comes towards us. And it boils down to these 2 lines. The top line is what our predictions are of very serious social issues. I'll pick one, for example, the prevalence of Alzheimer's in society, Alzheimer's and age-related dementia. The projections are like this. The amount of resources and volunteers we have to deal with it are like that. Prevalence of obesity and diabetes in younger populations, going like this. Resources to deal with it, much flatter. And as time goes by, the gap gets bigger. So we don't just need social innovation because it's the right thing to do. We need it because if we don't find a way to close those 2 lines, we are going to have a discussion about redefining human dignity. We are going to have a legitimate conversation and say, that's okay for older people to wander out into traffic if they have dementia, if they get hit by a car. What are you going to do? We don't have the resources for it. You can tell by my tone that is not a debate we're going to have. We are not going to redefine human dignity backwards. Instead, we need to find innovation that moves us forwards and closes those gaps. So we need innovation. What does this look like in the for-profit sector? Because the iPhone's just one example. There's a whole ton of innovation that happens in the for-profit sector that closes lines like that. Well, here's what the innovation curve looks like in the private sector. Over on the far margin over here on the left is failure. And in the middle, there are the companies that do okay, they make a bit of money, they stick around for a while, they might get merged, they might go bankrupt, whatever. But that narrow little slice over on that far margin is where you get profound innovation that changes society. But the thing is, that narrow little slice over there is where you get that transformational innovation. That's where we tend to focus most of our attention, as if that was easy. As if we said, you know, we'll put our brains to it and we will come up with the most productive innovations and we'll solve our problem. The challenge we have is that narrow little slice that transforms things is based on a bunch of things that are just okay and a whole bunch of things that didn't work. But the thing is, when you're starting out, you have no idea if it's going to fail or not. There were probably 10,000 people in Cupertino, California who were trying to start a business when Steve Jobs was starting Apple. They all thought they were going to succeed too. But they put ideas out in good faith, and as it worked through the system, a small number of them get to be that transformational innovation that changes things. So I'd love to show you a graph that looks like this for the nonprofit sector, but when you graph this in the nonprofit sector, it kind of looks like that. There's not a lot of failure. We don't want social organizations to fail, and that's a good thing. But unfortunately, there's not a lot of breakthrough, transformational social innovation. It all clusters in the middle of doing okay. Now that's fine if we want things to stay exactly the way they are, but it's not going to do anything to close those two lines back together. Now that doesn't mean that there isn't innovation in nonprofit organizations. They are by far some of the most innovative organizations in society. What I'm not talking about is their ability to innovate. I'm talking about the volume of innovation that we need around social cause in order to close those two lines. And I've got 3 examples of what that kind of innovation looks like. This is a nursing home in Deventer in the Netherlands. It's a deceptively simple idea. The idea here is this: social exclusion for older people really results in negative outcomes. Negative health outcomes, negative mental health outcomes. People die earlier, their quality of life isn't great. So what have they done? On each floor of that old age facility, that nursing facility, they free up a couple of apartments that go to university students, and in return for the apartment, the university students volunteer to spend some time with the older people. And the funny thing is, the exec director of the facility, they asked him, well, isn't there a bit of a cultural clash? University students tend to be loud and boisterous and everything else. He said, well, you know, a lot of our residents can't hear that well anyway, but they're also really happy to have that enthusiasm around, because what do we do with people who are older? We segregate them with people who are older. And what's a great recipe for increased social isolation? Keeping people who are exactly the same in one place. What's a good recipe for maybe trying to break it in an innovative way? Mixing it up a little. Here's another example of frugal innovation. We used to focus a lot of attention on how can we develop the next generation of medical tests, and we'll throw more money at it, it'll be very complex, and we'll invent some new machine from GE or Siemens that'll tell us whether people have cancer. That's great. We found through research that animals can do it just as well as, and in fact, some cases better than chemical-based or electronic-based tests. So dogs can apparently smell cancer in people much better than testing can. The third one, literacy is an incredibly important building block of a just society, of a democracy. Yet literacy, teaching people how to read, can be very expensive. We have a traditional model. 1 instructor, 30 students, some kind of blackboard, let me tell you about language. They're pioneering a very interesting thing in India called same language captioning. It's by an NGO called Planet Read. And that's a very deceptively simple yet innovative idea. What happens if you're watching television and you caption it in the same language that you're hearing it? That is a ridiculously cheap way to teach people how to read a language. I think the data I've seen on it, you can train, I think, 5,000 people for half an hour for $1. It's incredibly cheap, but innovative. Innovation doesn't have to be expensive, it just has to be a good idea. Now, if we were to ask people, what can we do to get more of this social innovation? Because I hope you're with me that we need it. We need a lot of it. We need a huge volume. A lot of people in the nonprofit sector would say, A, just give us more money and we'll fix the problem. I'm sorry to break the news to my colleagues in social activism, but we will never be able to print enough money to fix these problems. We need innovation, we don't just need cash. We do need smarter money. One of the innovations we have to come up with is a new way to fund social action that is not just about grants and donations. A lot of social action saves governments lots of money. Come up with a way to fund our current action out of future savings. We need smarter money. We also need to create spaces for people to think about things. We need to create breathing room for the nonprofit sector to actually innovate, because it's really hard for people who are dealing with homeless people every day in a counseling session to say, okay, I'm just going to separate myself from this and spend a couple of days thinking about how we can do this better. Often they're focused on just keeping the lights on, right? This, by the way, is a shot from the Social Venture Zone at Ryerson, where I'm the social innovator in residence. The giraffe is from a group called Children of Hope Uganda, where we're trying to create social products in northern Uganda that we can sell here to fund schools and orphanages for people in very remote areas. Neat idea. Do I know if it's going to work? Don't know. But universities and social labs all over the world are creating that safe space to try. So those are two innovations around money and space. But the one that I want to leave you with is around people with ideas. Because it's all well and good to have infrastructure and to have money. The deciding factor in whether or not innovation is going to happen on the scale we need it is a large number of people who are willing to try ideas and see if they work. We need a generation of people who can develop a new generation of meaning. Through our social consultancy, I've worked in 13 different countries in the last several years. And all over the world, there's an entire generation of people who are not going to be content going to whatever their equivalent of Bay Street or Wall Street is and making a whack of money and buying a Lamborghini and doing whatever people want to do. Whatever people want to do, that's fine. There's an entire generation of people who say, I want more than that. I want meaning in what I do, and I want to have an impact against something that matters. I don't want to find a new way to sell people toothpaste, but I'd really like to be having a discussion about making homelessness obsolete. Now, we don't need a couple of people who can do that. We need an entire generation of people who can do that. Just like in the 1970s in Silicon Valley, a bunch of people said, you know, maybe we could do something with this whole tech thing on a smaller scale and see where it goes. And we got the society we have now, where names like eBay and Google and Amazon and Apple are current things that we talk about as if they've always existed. We need that generation of effort, that huge amount of new ideas and committed people to come into the social sector and think about innovation. And the innovation journey in that case is essentially 3 phrases in 3 words. We need people who are going to be able to understand the area in which they're working, yes. Who are going to have to understand how social stuff gets done now, yes. But we're going to need an army of people who will ask 3 questions. Has anyone ever done that? That's a very deceptive starting point for innovation. Why don't we? Well, if no one's ever done it, why don't we try something like this? And once you hash it out, you need somebody who's going to say, yeah, let's give that a try. Let's see if it works. Because if we get enough of a volume of things like that happening that are innovative enough, some of them will fail. Innovation is not easy. There's going to be a lot of things that don't work. But if we want the breakthrough innovation that is going to reaffirm people's dignity, give us solutions to established social problems, and let us move forward together to solve these problems, that is what we were going to need. So that is the challenge that I want to leave with you. We need a generation of what Ashoka calls change makers, or what we call social innovators at Ryerson. We need a generation of people who are going to take that challenge and help us meet it. Thank you very much.